Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to Be Your Own Hero. I'm a stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer patient and doing very well and very happy about the way things are going. And what I do here is I share the stage with people who have cancer journeys and who look to inspire and help other people. And it's no different today. And things are going very well. And my health is in really good shape. I don't have any appointments here coming up, but I have one in a couple weeks. So I'll keep everybody informed as to what's going on. But as of right now, I feel great every day. I'm thankful to be alive, and I'm looking forward to this interview right here. And I'm so fortunate to have a gentleman from the right coast of the United States, from Tampa, Florida, Mr. Tim McDonald. Tim, please introduce yourself and let us know who you are, and we'll get this interview going.
Well, thank you, Mark. And we actually say, because I'm on the Gulf Coast of Florida, that we're on the West Coast here. But no, I'm Tim McDonald. I'm a stage 4 colorectal cancer patient. I was diagnosed back in November of 2020 with mets to my liver. Just recently had a liver transplant and am officially NED, which is no evidence of disease. And but unlike you, I actually have 4 things coming up next week. I got 2 blood tests, my first clinic visit with my oncology team after post-transplant, and a follow-up virtual visit with my transplant team on Friday.
That's fantastic. And one of the things I want to point out here is cancer journeys are very unique to each person, and each person decides which route they want to go, what they want to do. And as far as my opinion about it is I believe that the person should do what they feel is right for them. I'm never about, hey, you have to do it this way. You have to make your own decisions. You have to have your own journey because it's your life. And nobody's going to care more about your life than you. And so that's what we're going to journey today with Tim McDonald. So, Tim, uh, let's talk about the way your cancer journey started. In fact, we were talking before uh, the interview started here, and Tim's journey started like a month after mine did in late 2020. I started in October, and he started in November. So, Tim, let's talk about how your journey started.
Yeah, well, it was really on Thanksgiving of 2020, I started having this probably what I would term an intense pain in my right lower flank. In my, wasn't my stomach, it wasn't my side, it wasn't my back, but I guess I call it your flank. That's what they diagnosed me with when I went to the urgent care. But basically 4 days, it got progressively worse. And I kept telling my wife, I'm going to go in on Monday. I'm going to go wait until see if it subsides, wait to see if it goes down. And each day she's like, just go to the urgent care, just go to the urgent care. And she finally gave up asking me after Saturday. And I woke up on Sunday and it was so intense that I just told her I made an appointment to go to the urgent care today. And she goes, wow, I wasn't even going to ask you about it because I thought you were just going to do it tomorrow. And so I went to urgent care. They couldn't determine what it was, but thought it might have been kidney stones, but wanted to order a CT scan in order to determine what actually was happening. And since it was a Sunday, I needed to get the CT scan on Monday morning. I went and got the CT scan, and they made it very clear that not to call them back. They would give the results to the referring physician, and that referring physician would call me back. Well, early that afternoon on Monday, I got a call from the urgent care, which is right in my neighborhood. I walked all this stuff. And I remember joking with my wife at the time. I said, they asked if I could come in. And I said, yeah, I can be there in 5 minutes. And I joked with my wife saying, well, I guess it's not going to be as simple as them just phoning a prescription in for me. And I was laughing as I went out the door and went in. I knew something was up because you know how you got to register when you walk into any office and give them your name? They just said, "Oh, you're Mr. McDonald," as soon as I walked in the door. And I said, "Yes." And they're like, "Oh, come on back. We got a room for you." And I knew something was up then. And the doctor came in with one piece of paper and just sat down. And the first three words out of his mouth were, "You have cancer." And I remember I just had a big smile on my face like I do right now. And I just looked at him and I said, "Okay, what do we need to do now?" And he thought there was something wrong with me because I was just taking this so calmly, asked if he could call somebody, if I needed somebody to, get a ride from or something. And I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." I'm like, nothing that I can do right now is going to change what I just heard. So all I need your help with is just explaining to me what the next steps are that I need to take. And he basically told me that, really what I needed to do first was get a colonoscopy because my colon looked like it was almost completely blocked. And they needed to get in and see what was going on and either put a stent in or give me a bag, in place of the thing. And so that afternoon we drove down to a doctor in St. Pete. He said,
So let me pause you right
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. No, go ahead.
Was your wife with you at that particular time when your doctor gave you your diagnosis?
No, she was not with me. She stayed at home. But when I came home and I told her, she was devastated. And I said, "Don't worry, you know, we just need to figure out what's happening and we need to go down." She was a wreck driving down to St. Pete, and my wife doesn't like driving. And they told her that I really shouldn't be driving. So she had to drive. And it's not something that she likes doing, and she hates driving on highways. She's almost got a fear of it. So for her to drive me down there in a hysterical state was not good. And when we got down there, she was actually in the process of calling somebody, a friend of ours, to come down and help drive us back home. That's how bad she was doing.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so she took it very hard. And but yeah, she wasn't there when I heard. But the whole time I was in that doctor's office having this discussion, the thing in the back of my head was, I have the toughest job, which is going to go back to tell my wife.
Wow. Wow. I can only imagine. Whoa. So how, okay, so you accepted the diagnosis. How are you processing it, and how did that register with you at that time, or did you need time for it to sink in, or were
No,
you prepared mentally before that?
I think I was prepared mentally, not for hearing that, but just for anything that happens in life, right? About a decade before, I started really getting into, mindfulness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, about how we can use that to change some of the behaviors in our life that we don't like. And so I began that by just simply wanting to work on my temper and understanding that if I didn't want the same result, I couldn't keep doing the same thing. And so how do I stop changing that? And I'm not perfect at it by any means. I'm not saying that, but that really helped prepare me for hearing news like this. Because the first thing that went into my head was, well, this is devastating. But then I started thinking to myself, well, if I react any other way than looking at what do we need to do right now, all I'm doing is clouding up the situation, because wasting time on why it happened, how it happened, things I could have done differently is not going to change what I just heard.
That is phenomenal. I really, really admire that, Tim. And wow. Keep going, because I'm so fascinated as to because one of the biggest things that I talk about on my channel is mindset, and mindset, how important it is, especially the importance of having the proper mindset when you're dealing with cancer. And so many people, uh, I always like to use sports analogies because I'm big into sports. And the way you're talking about it, you're going on offense and you're looking forward and you're dealing with what you have. instead of being on defense and backpedaling, from the news. And so I really admire that. So please continue. This is fascinating.
Well, I think, to me, from the very beginning, I had an open mindset where I just wanted to learn as much as I could from as many different people as I could. And I knew the best way to do that was for me being open with my story and sharing my story. Because if I didn't share, people wouldn't know what I was going through and wouldn't be able to help me or as willing to help me. I've always realized, and it's a tattoo I got on my arm. I know it's not going to show up too well if I hold my arm up, but it says, "Let the world feel your heartbeat." And it was because many years ago, I got involved with a nonprofit, and it was the first time in my life I started sharing something consistently over and over and over again, and started seeing the impact that I was having so much greater than I had had before because of my consistency. And one person I told this story to told me, "You know what that is, Tim? It's letting the world feel your heartbeat." And so that's how I got the tattoo. But that's what I knew, and this is how I live my life, that if I wanted help, I just couldn't say this once. I was going to have to open up and share my story all the way through in order for people to take me seriously, to know that I was actually going through this, to know how they could help me, and to be open and receptive to wanting to help me. And so that's why I just felt like really big in the fact that if I wasn't open with this, I couldn't expect others to be open with me.
That is beautiful. So how did you get your wife to get in the same frame of mind as you?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to be the same, and I don't want us to be the same, right? I mean, that's what makes us unique and individuals. But what I tried to instill with her, especially early on when things weren't looking as good as they're looking now, is, if she worries about what happens if down the road, it takes away from the time that we have together right now. And if we're here right now, does she want to spend it crying and worrying, or does she want to be enjoying it and celebrating and laughing? And so it wasn't just as simple as me saying this once. It was over and over and over again. But after about, my 3-month scan, when things started looking like the tumors were shrinking, and we were having positive results, she kept little by little, she kept getting a little less about what might happen, what could happen down the road, and more into what can we do today? How are we going to celebrate life? How are we going to experience life together while we still have it?
Man, that is awesome. I love that. I absolutely love that. And so as you moved along, you got your diagnosis, you're looking ahead. So what was next on the radar?
Well, I mean, I'm going to go back before I got too far in, because I got connected with one oncologist down in St. Pete, and I live in Tampa, so it was about a 45-minute drive for me. And I loved him because the one thing that I still tell people all the time is the advice that he gave me. "Tim, I encourage you every step of the way to get a second, third, fourth, or fifth opinion, and find somebody that you feel is giving you the answers that you want to hear. You're not always going to get it, but at least that you feel comfortable enough that you feel like this is the right person for you to be working with." And so that's why I loved him, and I didn't want to go from him. But he's like, "Why are you driving 45 minutes each way to get your chemo infusions when there's a place like 10 minutes from your house that I can refer you to?" And so when he referred me to this other oncologist that was a lot closer to my house, I remember my first appointment with her. And again, Lori came with me, but at this time it was still pretty much the height of COVID. So I couldn't have her in the room with me. And I'm glad she didn't, because this doctor, I remember her looking at me and saying, "I don't know why your oncologist had you on this chemo, mix. You have 3 years to live. I'm going to put you on this chemo mix to give you the best quality of life that you can have for what you have left." And the first words in my head as she said that was, "That's your story, not mine." And when I went out, we were in the elevator going down, and I told Lori, and she had another breakdown. And I just took her shoulders and looked her right in the eyes, and I told her that exact thing. That was her story, not mine. we're not going to be pursuing with this oncologist. We're going to fire her, get another one that I believe in and that believes in me.
Man, that is fantastic. I love that. Absolutely love that. I mean, you're talking about the lessons that I talk about on this channel all the time. So my hat's off to you for having the fortitude to do that. I just absolutely love it. So let's continue on with the story. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I got into right after I fired her, I was able to get into Moffitt Cancer Center here in Tampa. They're one of the top 10 cancer centers in the US. And the oncologist that we met with was just like, he didn't talk about numbers of years I had, what my prognosis was. He just said, you're young enough and you're healthy enough. We can put you on a really aggressive chemo, but it's going to come with a lot more aggressive side effects. And I just looked at my wife and we both nodded with each other and said, yes, right there on the spot. It wasn't anything that we needed to think about. This is what we were going to do. And I had a good feeling that, people always say they get scanxiety. I've never really experienced it. It's like the anxiety you get leading up to a scan, once you get the scan, before you get the results, and then what the results are. Again, I'm not going to change anything by worrying about it. So I might as well not worry about it and enjoy my life. And so I never worried, but I probably, I've always had good results in my scans too. So I can't say that that would continue if I kept having negative or bad results in my scans. But as we started going through this, I had about 6 months, so 2 scans of good results. And I just remember looking at my wife going, this chemo is kicking my ass. I said, I do it every 2 weeks. I have about 11 to 12 bad days and 1 to 2 good days before I got to do it all over again. I just don't know how much longer I can do this chemo. I said, but since I've had such good results, 6 months ago, I was told I was not a surgical candidate. My oncologist still today is telling me I'm not a surgical candidate, but my oncologist is not a surgeon. Why don't I go outside and talk with some surgeons that will tell me if I'm a candidate or not? And so I met with my oncologist and I told him I had 2 meetings set up. One was with a surgeon out in Los Angeles who was world renowned at telling people that he could give them a resection when most others wouldn't. And the other was with a surgeon who did liver transplants. And he was up in New York, and he was there's only 14 places in North America that do living donor liver transplants for metastasized colorectal cancer patients. And this particular center did more than anybody else in North America. And so that's why I wanted to get.
So the one that was the one in New York then?
Yeah, in Rochester, New York. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I remember telling my oncologist, because it was just a Facebook memory, and he said something along the lines of, I don't think that's going to work for you, but I'm not discouraging you from talking to anybody else. And fast forward a year and a half, and now he is actually saying, he told me last December when I met with him, because I usually meet with his PAs, he actually told me, Tim, if I were you, I would go for a liver transplant. Where a year and a half ago, he was telling me it was outside the box and he wouldn't even think that anything was going to work for me. So it's all about like how you continue to advocate for yourself and not just take what I was brought up being told that we need to respect our experts, right? And you always listen to what the doctor tells you. And so this was a big shift for me. It was a 180-degree shift to understand how to advocate for yourself. And that learning that just because he's a doctor doesn't mean he's the one who knows about surgery. And, he'll tell you that firsthand. I'm not a surgical doctor. I'm an oncologist. I can tell you anything about oncology that you want, but when it comes to surgery, I can just give you my opinion. I'm not the expert. And so I went out to what I felt were going to be, that I had the most confidence in, the best doctors in their fields. And after I talked with the liver transplant one, I started understanding how much better that would be for me, because it gave me a longer chance of a life. It gave me a better chance of life without recurrence of cancer. And if it did recur, it would probably be monitored so closely that they'd be able to remove it without having surgically, without having to start chemo again. And my whole thing was, after 2.5 years on chemo, I didn't want to be on chemo again in my
I don't
life.
blame you. Don't blame you one bit.
So I really, and that led to me then pursuing the liver transplant, which was a lot of, I mean, people, and there are people that, pursue a liver transplant, have their meeting, and 6 months later are getting a liver transplant. My whole process took 1.5 years, almost 2 years. From the time because for most, well, at least my center that I worked with, you needed to have a positive response to your chemo for a year before you were eligible to be a transplant candidate.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
was only 6 months in. I needed another 6 months of chemo. And then it was like, and anybody that's been through this knows nothing in the medical world works as quickly as we want it to, right? And so I had to get a biopsy done on a lymph node. I had to get a colon resection, but before I could get my colon resection, I needed another colonoscopy. And it was like all these things that backed up. So even though I was technically, if all these things would have happened in a month or two, I would have been eligible for a transplant in December. I wasn't eligible until March of the following year.
Wow. Wow. I I mean, I love your tenacity for your life and for your situation. And that's a beautiful thing. And you chose a particular route that you wanted to go, and you doggedly followed that route, and I admire that. I truly admire that, and I wish more people would do that. Getting second opinions when things don't feel comfortable, because this is not an exact science at all, and
No,
there's
and
not
I
a
gotta,
clear path.
yeah, and I gotta tell you, Mark, it was, those first like 3 months when I was trying to get this lymph node biopsied and get my colon resection scheduled. Um, when you have a surgeon that is up in New York and your team in Florida, here in Tampa, Florida, um, it would be so easy if you had everybody's cell phone numbers and could just say, just call. But it's not that easy, you
No.
know? And so it took about a month and a half of me being, you know, poke, 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 poke. Did this get done? Have you talked to each other? Please follow up with so and so. Of doing that, of me doing that, because I didn't do that. I didn't know if they were actually going to connect with each other. But now they're connected, and everything's so simple and easy. They just talk to each other when they need to. They get on the phone and have conversations that normally would have taken me a month to 6 weeks, now take a day. And it's so seamless now. But that took my effort and me being exactly what you said, that tenacity to not give up and making that happen. And it's not easy, especially when you're going through all this treatment, but nobody else is going to do this for you. You need to be the one who does it for yourself.
Man, that I'm going to relinquish the floor, and you could start taking over my channel, because what you're saying right here is what I've been talking about for several years now. And so that is just absolutely incredible. So you had the surgery. Tell us what happened with that.
Well, then I had the colon resection removed. I didn't have any actual tumor left in there. They biopsied it after they did it. There was no cancer remaining in my colon, which was a very good sign. But I still had spots on my liver. So then I had my donor meeting, because basically almost every colorectal cancer patient doesn't qualify to get on a donor list, because people that are qualifying for a donor list are so sick that they're in the hospital already and they're about to die. And those are the first people that get livers from deceased donors. So basically, almost all colorectal cancer patients have to get a living donor, which means that you have to go out and search for your own donor and get one. So, like I said, normally that might take, anywhere from 3 to 8 months for most people. It took, and I thought I was going to get this done like in 3 months, because I was going to be like, I know so many people and I'm going to get this done quick. It took me 14 months, and I actually didn't get one that called for me. I was the first ever colorectal cancer patient that had a liver transplant at University of Rochester up in Rochester, New York, that got a liver transplant from a altruistic donor. It did not come from an
Wow.
accepted donor. She did not call for me. She actually called for another colorectal cancer patient who I happen to know and wasn't a match. And they had asked her, "Are you willing to donate to somebody else in a similar situation?" And she said, "Of course." And
Wow.
that's how I got my donor. And we're actually like family now. I mean, we become such good friends. We drove to the transplant surgery together. We saw each other there, and before we left Rochester, my wife and I actually had dinner with her and her husband. So,
Man, that is phenomenal. What a fantastic story. So why don't we segue into this? Tim is also a contributing author to Tim Sohn's book, Perspectives on Cancer, which Tim is holding right there.
there we go.
Uh, why don't you talk briefly about that experience and
Yeah,
what you talked about in your chapter?
yeah, well, a lot of what I talked about was kind of summed up in the chapter of what we just talked about, plus a few more things. But Tim and I have known each other through Stephen Kaplan, who's a mutual friend of both of ours, and so we've known each other from the social media days, well before I was diagnosed. But once I was diagnosed and Stefan reconnected us together again, because Tim's show that he was doing, and said, man, Tim, you need to get with Tim and have him on. And so we just connected again and have stayed in touch. I've connected him with several groups that I belong to, and cancer groups and everything. And so when he asked if I was willing to be a contributor to the book, I said absolutely. One of the things I love doing, and you can tell already, Mark, and it's what you do too, is really just be out there and share our story so other people hear it and can be inspired. It's not that we give them instruction on what to do, it's that we give them ideas on what they might be able to use themselves in their own journey. And so any chance I get to do that, I love to do that. And so when Tim reached out, I just like, count me in, and gave him a little blurb, and got the book out, and then connected with you through the launch party for the book. And it's just been, this is the one thing I think everybody looks at cancer as this very horrible disease. And it is. I'm not making light of it in any stretch of the imagination, but in a way it's a gift. It's a gift that connects us with people that we never would have connected with before. It's a way to let people tell you things about your own self that they normally only say once you're dead at your funeral. And to me, I don't think that I ever realized that component of having a disease like cancer. And so for me, it's just been an unbelievable experience. I mean, both with its low points and with its high points.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to steal that line about, you know, people talking at your funeral. That is really great. Uh, Tim, I love you. Just love your positive attitude and the way you've approached your cancer. That is absolutely fantastic. And you're very rare, after all the hundreds and maybe even thousands of people that I've met in my journey, you are truly unique, and my hat's off to you. Uh, I am so glad that we connected. And so what I'd like to do at this time is to get a final thought from you about your journey and what you'd like to share with our audience.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things that I really realized early on was, even though the cancer was in my body, that it was really my wife and I dealing with this cancer together. It wasn't that one of us had cancer and the other one didn't. It was that both of us had to experience this together if we wanted to come through this together. And so I think it's important when you are going through this, that you are open and communicate with your partner, but that you also take the time to understand and listen, and sometimes have to pull it out of them how they're feeling too, because a lot of times they're going to hide what they're feeling because they don't want to put an extra burden on you, and you need to be open enough to make sure that they're still sharing with you. And I think when you do that and you start appreciating each other on a deeper level than you ever could have before. And one of my friends, Lee Silverstein, has a podcast, and it's called We Have Cancer. And he told me the story of how he got that name. And it was from somebody that listened to his story about how it impacted him and his wife, who he found out he had cancer the day after they started dating. So, and talking about his story, and he goes, "You know what the name of your podcast should be? It's We Have Cancer." And ever since I met him early on in my journey, I've just understood that. I've applied that to my relationship with my wife, and it's really helped me get to where I am today because we did this together, not me just doing it on my own.
Man, that is awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And somewhere down the road, we're going to have to connect on another interview because, as time goes on, things change, things come up, we grow. So, yeah, no, I completely, I'm just so impressed by you and what you've done. And so thank you very much for joining me on To Be Your Own Hero. And what I'd like to do at this time is to share with everyone a couple of quotes, uh, positive quotes from Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. And the first one is, the secret of life isn't in what happened to you, but what you do with what happens to you. And so that's very appropriate for you, Tim. And the second one is, the vital secret of successful living is to get turned on with self-repeating enthusiasm, in-depth enthusiasm, and to keep the positive principle going. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here at To Be Your Own Hero. Please subscribe, like, make a comment in the comment section of the video, and have the greatest week until we meet next time. And make sure that you appreciate and enjoy and get the most out of every single day, every single hour, every single minute, and every single breath. Thank you so much once again for joining us here at To Be Your Own Hero. We will see you next week, and take care. Thank you.